so you're looking to go big. One of the most fun aspects of kiteboarding is just going as fast as possible and sending it. You know, on those days where the wind is pounding, the sand is blowing in your face, there's nobody on the beach except for the wind junkies. Your heart is pounding, all you hear is the constant hum of the wind in your ears, maybe your friends shouting as you're trying to pump up. You know, as everybody gets going and they're getting in the air, the people start lining up on the piers, cars are pulling over the road to watch, and it can be pretty epic. Big air is one of the most exciting and eye-catching aspects of our sport. So with all that said, this week we're going to break down the 5 best boards for big air. Now the funny thing about kiteboarding is you can throw the most advanced wakestyle trick in the world, and to the average person it means nothing. Now, average Joe goes out, sends it, gets 40 feet of air, and people lose their minds. Crowds literally form to watch the show, and best of all, big air is fairly easy to do. All you need is a little speed, send it, and pull the trigger. From there it just takes a little bit of grit and a lot of control. Now with this particular video, I need to set some parameters as there are a ton of variables to consider, from conditions to rider level to the school of thought when it comes to big air. For example, when conditions change, your tools have to change. So in lighter winds, you know, board speed is absolutely critical. You need a moderate to a low rocketed board to generate that speed and get the pop you need to get the air. Conversely, when you're going out in stronger winds, a lot of riders will look for a heavily rocketed board, something that makes it a bit slower so you can actually control that kite. And what happens in the stronger winds is that kite's just going to rip you off the water, and it's really easy to lose control and get overpowered and start skipping and generate way too much board speed way too fast. Now on top of that, while compiling this list, you know, I went through what a lot of the riders are using in King of the Air and just what some of the higher level athletes are using. And with that said, what might be good for the highest level athlete might not be so good for the average intermediate to advanced rider. I've made my choices for the average winds, meaning something like maybe 15 to 25 miles per hour, and for riders who are choosing the appropriately sized kite, meaning that you're not underpowered and you're not significantly overpowered. And these are just the most well-rounded boards that are going to take your jumping to the next level. Now with all that said, this might be the most subjective video that I've done to date, and of course, like every video here, I've done my research, I've talked with my coworkers, I've gone through the forums and put a lot of thought into this. However, a lot of you out there have a lot of great opinions and a lot of great experiences, and this series has never been about what I had to say. It's always been about having a conversation and what you guys have to say. So, old school guy, chime in, let us know what you're riding and why you love it and what your train of thought is. New school guys, please do the same. And if you're riding a board that happens to be on this list, let us know what you love about it and let us know what you don't like about it. Now I'm trying something new with these videos, and like I mentioned last week, every single video I do is actually also a written blog. So with this blog, I've written up the boards that I thought were the most well-rounded for the average wind conditions, but I've also made a list of what I thought were the best boards for high wind. So if you're curious to just learn a little bit more about the subject and just dive in a bit deeper and see some other trains of thought, then click the eye icon right now on your video, and you can finish this video on our blog, and then you can read more and see what I may have added after the video. And before we dive into my list, I just wanted to give you guys a few tips for getting big air in average conditions. So there's a few things that you want to look for out of your board. You know, it needs to be moderately rockered, but not heavily rockered. It should be stiff. It should be grippy so that you can really hold down that edge and you have control when you have a lot of speed. And if you really want to do yourself a favor, use bigger fins. So in no particular order, here are my 5 choice boards for big air. So let's start with North. Now for North, I've chosen the Jaime Techstream and the Jaime. And the reason that I went for this board in particular, you know, is that it's very well rounded. So it's not as niche as the North Team series. And you know, it's more well-rounded than say the North X-Ride. And what you get out of this board is something that, you know, it's very beginner friendly, but an advanced rider is going to absolutely love this board. Now I've chosen both of these boards as one pick. Now the biggest difference between the Jaime and the Jaime Techstream is the Jaime Techstream is going to be lighter and stiffer, therefore it's going to pop better. But something interesting about the Jaime is, while it is a carbon board, it's not nearly as stiff or unforgiving as a lot of other carbon boards. And a lot of this has to do with the design. So with the Techstream, and I believe the regular Jaime as well, they've actually softened the tips and tails. And what this does, it helps when you're riding in the chop. But getting back on point here, you know, this board, it's really easy to generate a lot of board speed. It has excellent channels for good grip. and you can really get a lot of speed and maintain that control and just send it with this board. And as a matter of fact, this was our team rider Blake Olson's choice board for all of 2017. So if you followed that series at all, you'll notice that most of the time Blake is on a Jaime Tech Stream. And you know, the biggest difference between the regular Jaime and the Jaime Tech Stream is the regular Jaime is going to be a little more damp, meaning it won't be as reactive and it won't have as much pop, but it's pretty close. And for riders out there who ride foot straps, you're definitely going to want to go with the Tech Stream. However, if you ride boots, the Tech Stream is not reinforced, it's not made for boots, so you're going to want to stick with the regular Jaime. Now next up on my list is the Cabrini Ace. And like the Jaime, this board also comes in a carbon version, but unlike the Jaime, this board is not as freestyle minded. This is Cabrini's high performance all around board, and it's actually the choice board of Nick Jacobson. With that said, this board has all the characteristics that you need to get massive air. Now with the Ace version of this board, what you're going to get is a lighter board, a stiffer board, and you know, maybe a touch more pop, and as well it's just going to be a touch more reactive. So the Ace is known for being a mildly damp board, and when you go to the carbon version, you're just going to feel that much more connected to the water. You're going to feel everything. But you know, if you go through a lot of the reviews, you'll find that a lot of people will say that it does still handle the chop quite well. So it's not really so much a knee buster, which makes this board a pretty compelling offering. Now this board is known for holding a very controlled edge and appealing to a broad audience of riders, meaning whether you're feeling really strong, you know, you're 20 years old and you're just ready to rip, or you're that 50-year-old rider who just wants a really fun, little more forgiving board, this is actually going to be a good candidate for both riders. And not to scare you away by calling this a very well-rounded board, like I mentioned before, to give you perspective, this is the board that Nick Jacobson uses, and all you have to do is do a quick Google search of him and you'll see what I'm talking about regarding performance of this board. Now speaking of high-level riders, moving on to the next board on my list, we have the Nash Monarch. Now if you've been paying attention to Red Bull King of the Air, you might know that this is the choice board of Kevin Langry. Now this board is an obvious choice for big air. You know, it has a low rocker profile, it's made for really fast speeds, yet it holds down a ton of control. This board is designed to go fast and hold down that edge and stay in control when you're going into high speeds that you need to get big air. Now when doing these videos, I try to not get too tech and not go too much into a lot of the jargon that you might hear in a lot of other videos when talking about boards. But this board, it does have some interesting design characteristics. So they actually have a carbon X that's built in, and I guess the idea here is when you push down on your feet, that X should translate that pressure directly into the fins that are angled at 10 degrees. And what this does is gives you more upwind drive and more efficacy when you're really loading that board, and just allows this board to really be incredibly efficient and just a huge contender for getting big air. Now one of the reasons that this board made my list is because it's still a very well-rounded board. So like I said, when I was compiling this list, I didn't want to go too niche. I wanted to pick a board that everybody could enjoy and everybody could progress with, and it's going to make your life easier when jumping big air. And this is one of the few very advanced freestyle boards out there that still had beginners in mind. And you know, a beginner could jump on this board and love it right away. And the most high-level athlete like Kevin can take this board out and win competitions. So the Monarch is a no-brainer when it comes to this list. Now moving on, when looking at Liquid Force's lineup, I actually had a much harder time choosing a board with my set parameters, and I really had to put a lot of thought into this one. And what I finally settled on was the Liquid Force Legacy. Now I chose the Legacy for a few reasons, and I'm sure by now you can guess what they are. You know, as far as the lineup goes with Liquid Force, this is not their most heavily rockered board. It has channels for good grip and control. They've implemented a little bit of carbon, making this board a bit lighter and a bit poppier. And as far as this list goes, this board is a bit different than the rest. So a lot of people like to joke and call the Legacy like an old man's board or the Cadillac of kiteboards. And while there is some truth to that, this board's still an excellent performer. You know, and if you're that rider that's just looking to get out there and cruise and have fun, and you want a really comfortable ride, but you want to also send it and get big air, you know, this is going to be a good board for a lot of riders like that. Of all the boards on my list, this is likely the dampest, meaning it won't be as responsive, but you know, it's going to be a bit more forgiving on the knees. And some interesting design points is this board kind of has a throwback to the old school design where when kiteboards used to have the pickle fork. And what this does is with the wider tails on this board is it allows the rider to really dig in that edge and just have a little more control when they're edging their kiteboard to jump or to get upwind, making this an incredibly well-rounded board. Now, most importantly, Liquid Force has put a lot of time and research into designing this board. So they've been designing boards, I think, since 1995, and they're a company that I just hold in the highest regard when it comes to intelligent board design. And this is actually the choice board of Jason Slezak. So if you're curious about a little bit of kiteboarding history, Google him as well, and just learn a thing or two. He's been at it forever. He's an absolute legend, an amazing ambassador of the sport. And what it comes down to is if you're looking for what can only be described as the Cadillac of big air, this is likely a good choice for you. Now, last but not least, I have Slingshot. Now, this was hands down the hardest board for me to pick in my set parameters. And what it is Slingshot has some amazing options for high wind days. Boards like the Refraction are absolutely perfect when the wind is nuking 35 plus. You're throwing mega loops and you just want that all-out performance board. It's the board that Sam Light uses, just an incredible board. But with the parameters that I've set, it was a bit more difficult to find a board that's going to be, a performer in the average winds. And so with this, after doing a lot of careful consideration, I've settled on the Slingshot Misfit, but with a small caveat. You do want to size down with the Misfit, and the reason I say that is this board is just incredibly efficient. So with the Slingshot Misfit, it's really easy to build up board speed. It's really easy to get upwind. I mean, this board has been a lifesaver for beginners for a long time. It's been in the Slingshot lineup forever. Just a very reliable board. Almost, not to overuse this word, but almost legendary status. This is just an incredible board. But when it comes to big air, this board is actually almost too efficient. So when it comes to the Misfit, you actually have to get into more of an old school mentality and ride a smaller board, because this board is just so efficient that you can really generate that speed, and just to maintain that control, you'll likely want to size down on the Misfit. Now, all that said, while it was a bit harder to find a board for these set parameters, don't be mistaken, because Slingshot, admittedly, I am biased. Slingshot does make my favorite boards, but that's just my own personal bias. So with all that said, the Misfit, it's an incredible board for big air, and there were a few other options in the Slingshot lineup that I considered, and this was kind of a harder choice for me, so I would love to hear some of your feedback. Slingshot riders out there, let me know what you're using for big air and why you're using it, and just let our viewers know what you think constitutes a good big air board from that lineup. So hey guys, I hope you found this video helpful, and I have a feeling I'm going to bring a lot of people out of the woodwork on this one, and to that I say good, please chime in. This is about getting a conversation going. This is about getting different trains of thought and just looking at things differently. So chime in, help out the viewers who are trying to figure this out, and let them know your thoughts and your experiences on different boards. And like I said, there are a lot of schools of thought when it comes to big air, a lot of variables to consider, and there's different tools for different conditions. With that said, like I mentioned earlier, if you click the eye icon, there is a written blog where I go into more detail for the different tools of the trade, the different boards that you might use in different conditions, and this is just my list. So, let us know your thoughts and help some of those viewers out today. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. And until next Wednesday, this has been Rygo, and I will see you next week.